Cognitivist view of language learning. As you would remember, whenever we evaluate a theory or an approach, we also look at how that theory actually looks at the language learning process. So cognitivist theorists, psychologists, they use laboratory techniques to measure the performance indicators of the learners. They try to understand how do the learners actually use the language, but this is done definitely in a more controlled environment of a laboratory. Linguists, as we discussed earlier also, they apply linguistic analysis techniques and they are more interested in the language that the learners actually develop or are in the process of developing, rather than trying to understand the process by which language is learned. This process, how the language is actually learned, falls in the domain of cognitivist theorists or psychologists. Both methodologies have their own benefits. You would like to know what is there in the language of the second language learners as they are developing towards the target language structures, and what does interlanguage, that is now when they are not proficient users of the language, what does it indicate? What type of processes does it indicate about their learning? However, cognitivist theories are more interested in the mental developmental processes. They are the ones who gave us this concept that learning happens in certain stages. They are the ones who give us this concept of how the information regarding second language that comes to the learners, how do they distribute it across their brain, how different parts of the brain process the information, and this allows us to look at how language impairment occurs if there is damage to one part of the brain or the other. So, although the ultimate goal of any second language acquisition model that we want to develop or to understand holistically how does language actually is learned, involves both theories, linguistic theories as well as the cognitive theories. And in that part, we can say that cognitive view of language learning is a partial view of language learning. However, it is certainly a very important one. It has enriched our understanding of how language is learned, and the studies, cognitive studies, have allowed us to understand the processes of language learning that go on in the minds of the learners. For instance, as classroom teachers, what is it that we can learn about language learning process of the learners in our classrooms? It tells us that no matter how much correction we are trying to do with the learners, if the learners are consistently still making a lot of mistakes in the same construction, that means the problem does not lie with the learner, but the syllabus itself, because the learners are not yet at the developmental stage at which they can learn the structure that you're trying to teach them. So no matter how much you punish them, they will not be able to learn it unless they reach their developmental stage at when things can be learned. Take, for example, connectionism. What does it tell you as teachers? It tells you that we should allow our learners to develop associative patterns. Try to link the new knowledge of the second language with the knowledge that they already have and facilitate formation of associative patterns, because by thinking of one thing, it will remind them of the other things. For example, just a small example. For example, when you are teaching them words and meanings in lists, although the children will rote learn and reproduce them in the exams, yet it will never be helpful for them to actually use the words in their real life, because they have not been allowed to develop associative patterns with the use of those words or new vocabulary.